day, good afternoon, good evening, depending on what coast you're on, right? Jeff Colson, Junior Hockey Advisor. We're here Monday night, 9 o'clock at night, and I am so excited to get rolling tonight. We've got a lot of things to discuss, but we've got some great people coming on. We've got some great guests coming on. Right off the bat, let's get Bloomer in here to help talk about all this stuff because it's going to be a good show. Mike, you there?
What's going on, Jeff?
I'm so glad your hat's not on backwards.
I got one here. I can throw it on if you need me to.
We have guests coming on tonight, so let's make sure we look appropriate, okay? Mind your manners.
Mm-hmm.
You know how that works, right?
I'll figure it out.
Well, listen, tonight we're going to be speaking to Bob Stroik in a little bit. Bob is not only is he an ACHA Division II coach for the University of Delaware, but he also works for the government as a research scientist, and he'll explain all that. But we're going to get in some really good things later in the show. We'll take your questions, and we'll also get into some things about some upcoming showcases that people have some questions about that I took off air. We'll get into that later, and anything else you want to talk about, we'll jump in. Right off the bat, I see some people jumping on and saying congrats. We did hit 800 subscribers on YouTube. You know we've been battling with YouTube for a while to try to figure out the whole game with is so much different. Facebook, boom, we're rolling, 50, 100 new members each week on each of the different sites. Things are rolling, but just YouTube it's a drain to get a crowd growing over there. And I get it, demographics, when they see my face and they see Bloomer's face, they turn the other way. So maybe we just got to hire some young actors to play the part and help us grow the audience there. So, but anyway, thank you for mentioning that. If you haven't jumped over to our Junior Hockey Advisor page on YouTube yet, jump over there. I think you'll enjoy it. I think you'll enjoy seeing all the different videos we do, and it gives you access to a lot of things. And subscribe, like and subscribe. That's the big game. You know that. Let's see if we can get that number up to 1,000. That's the important number for us, and we're getting really close. So what are we here? What are we doing? Yeah, once again, I'm Jeff. That's Mike. We talk about the progress and the progression of hockey players from 16 to 18 all the way through juniors and on to college. And so part of what this whole process is about is trying to just walk through the different situations you can have, which brings us up to our first guest. And we don't have guests many times. This is rare. We do interview shows where we do a whole hour with different people in the hockey world. But to have a live guest, this is kind of special for us. We just don't do it very often. And we're going to bring him on now and introduce you to Bob. And let's see where I'm going to put him. Should I put him on the left of you, Mike?
Right in the middle.
I don't know if it allows me to put him in the middle. I'll put him over here. Hey, how are you doing, Bob?
How you doing, guys?
Hey, the microphone sounds excellent, by the way. I just want to let you know that.
Good.
So Bob's coming on tonight for the purpose of explaining some of the data research he's done. But before we get into that, tell us a little bit about your hockey background. I know you're really dedicated to your program at the University of Delaware. Maybe talk a little bit about the program there and what you guys got going on. And then we can start talking about some of this research you're doing, because I find it fascinating. And I hope that if I'm finding it fascinating, at least some knucklehead out there will see it the same way I do.
Yeah, hopefully. So we have, 3 teams at the University of Delaware. They're all club teams. ACHA, 2 of them, and one is that new AAU league. It used to be CHF. Now it's going to be AAU. And we got 2 rinks on campus here. So we have a pretty big program. It goes back to 1971. So been around for a while. And it keeps expanding. There's more players, every year, and we're trying to find a home for them and, keep them in the game as long as we can, So,
Bob, I might have missed it. Are you running just one team there, or does Delaware run more than one team, ACHA?
We have a ACHA Division I team,
okay.
Division II team, and then the AAU.
As well. Okay.
We have 3 teams. And we have a women's Division II team too. So we have
okay.
4 programs. Yeah.
Okay. So with those teams that you have, let's make sure that we look at Delaware as one of the schools when I bring up your chart. I'll control it, but you kind of navigate me if I'm missing something there, okay? Because part of what I'd like to do when we look at these charts is to kind of get an idea of, where are your grassroots players from? What's the flow to your team? You probably could pop that off the top of your head, but now we've got a tool. You've developed a tool that'll help people at not only D3 but ACHA level. That's not been there before. It's just not there's people that do D3 research, but nothing like this. And for those of you who are wondering what the heck I'm talking about, I'm going to pull this up for you so you can get a taste of it and see what I'm talking about here. And I'm going to pull that up right now. Do that here. Oh, that's my daughter. Don't think I've got any kind of weird pictures up there, Mike, before you say anything.
You told me to mind my manners and P's and Q's, so I'm not saying anything today.
Okay, so this is and we've already posted this on our site, but this is what Bob does is he takes this is NCAA D3, and what Bob does is he builds out a graph so you can look at a team over here on the left, and it's a big chart, so I'm trying to make it so you can actually read it while you're watching this. So if I take Adrian College, now that's a powerhouse school, and I pull that up, now I can look at this D3 school, and right off the bat I can just scan across top. 8 players came from NCAA Division I. They've got 8 players from the OJ. They've got 5 players from the NAL. They've got 2 players from the NCDC, and you can see how the boxes, which is a popular way of doing statistics now. Bob, is there a name for this type of graph or this type of chart?
Yeah, that's called a tree map.
Okay, a tree map?
Yeah.
Okay.
Tree map, yeah.
So, and you see the box get smaller. NCAA Division III, so transfer players in. The NOJO, the CCHL, the EHL, and the WSHL. Interesting because there's a map right below it that allows you to see actually what province and what states the players are coming from, which I find fascinating too, because as you scroll through different teams, you can see that there's certain teams that are built in certain areas, and there is a feel of provincial teams in some cases. Then over on the far right, which I find really interesting, is that actually gives you the names of the places they came from. So you can see that, when you talk about that NCAA block, you can see it's Alaska Fairbanks. Then you go down a little bit and you can see University of Denver. You can see down here there's Mercyhurst, Ferris State, Bowling Green, and American International, just a few of them. But very, very fascinating because then it also, you click on the EHL button. You can see what state the EHL player came from. You push on the CCHL button, you can see where that player came from. And it's just fascinating. Bob, how long did it take you to actually put this together?
I've done it a couple years. I did. If you click on my profile link up there on the top, I think it goes back to 2021 or 2020. I would do the ACHA Nationals. That was, what I was interested in. And I would, hand jam, my data set in there, just on the 16 or 20 teams that were at Nationals. And one year I got tired of doing that and decided to get a programmer to write me a script to go through them all. And I said, well, if I can go through 20 of them, I can go through 100 just as easily. So we went that route. So what it does is it looks at, each team, goes to that elite prospects file for each player and goes to the team that's the first one that finds that it's not the current team. So that's why the NCAA will show the transfers instead of like their junior team.
Right.
Which is kind of, I guess, useful for this group too, because, if you're sending kids off to school and they don't stick, you still need credit for that, or, you put them in a bad position maybe.
That's a great point, because you also could be looking at a Division III team and saying, oh, I'm really good at junior hockey, not knowing you're also competing against Division I players that are coming back to D3.
Exactly.
So that pool of opportunity shrinks a little bit, and especially with that, with the whole situation we had with the pandemic and that extra year that Division I players got, that changed things a little bit. So, yeah, okay. So, I want to just kind of throw some other things. I want people to see this so they know where what you do. I'm going to pull up this is the ACHA chart, and I'm going to try to get. I'll grab the D2 just because it's here. I know that there's the D1 too, but let me grab the D2, and only because of ease of being able to grab it quickly from the system. So once again, over here we've got all the colleges. We've got Adrian. Oops, sorry, it decided to. Arizona State, Army, all the different places that have ACHA D2. And if you see here, you want to talk about opportunities, ACHA D2. You look at the bottom here and you start looking at the amount of players and where they're coming from. We're talking. Go ahead.
Sorry about 5,000 players in total.
5,000 players, 5,000 opportunities for people coming out of junior hockey. And you'll see here, and we'll talk about it in a second. It's just not all junior hockey when you start talking about ACHA D2 and D3 hockey. But Mike, pick out a place you want to look at. What state do you want to look at?
Alabama.
I don't even know how to find Alabama on here. Which one?
You're in the right area.
Is that Alabama right there? No, that's Georgia.
Yeah, that's Georgia.
Alabama's right next to it. There we go. There's Alabama. So we pull up Alabama. Strike one. Come on, pick a state that you're going to have a hockey player.
Oh, this is for the players? I thought it was the programs.
Well, no, this is ACHA D2, and this is Origin. The origins where the players come from. I can pull up and look and see, like, for example, if I'm doing this right, Bob, if I just hit Michigan, that shows me 182 players from Michigan that are at that level, correct? Am I doing that wrong?
Correct. That's correct. Yeah, in the states with more guys, it squeezes them all onto that little panel there, so it gets a little hard to see with the Michigans, the Massachusetts, and what have you. But I think every state other than I think Mississippi and maybe Hawaii, I think, are represented.
Alabama. we just found that one out. Okay, so just using Michigan as the example, I hit Michigan. Now I can go look and see. Here's all the colleges. And I can see, okay, who really hits it? Well, Central Michigan University, which makes sense. Central is a very popular school to go to for, every high school kid in the state. You look down here, Lake Superior State. I wouldn't have imagined it's that high, but there you go. Michigan State, I would expect that to be high. Michigan Tech, Northern Michigan University. And there's also a theme with these schools too, except for Central. They're all hockey schools. So I'm sure that some of these kids went up there with the thought process of maybe, hey, I'll try out for the D1 team, see what happens, and if not, I'll stay and go to school. I know a lot of kids that have that mindset, but just a great way to break it down, Bob. I really like that. And the other way to do it is, let's just go over here and look at U18 AAA. Now I can see where the U18 AAA players are coming from that are playing at that level, which is really cool too. And if I just pull up New York, now I can see what leagues they played in up on top here, I believe. I'm sorry, getting a little ahead of myself.
You might have got a little deep there in the filters. Sometimes it's best to refresh.
Oh, okay. I'll hit refresh just to make sure. But just a fantastic tool, Bob.
But it works from right to left as well. So if you were interested in an actual junior program, that's why I posted it to this group. I was always working left to right, and I wasn't really concerned about it. Then I clicked on the filter one day. I was like, hey, I think, people might be interested to see, this team sends players to these colleges usually, and if my particular college isn't one that, they ever send anybody to, and there's another one that sends people there religiously, maybe that's the team I want to look at,
Okay, so let's go back to that D3.
I have a school in mind.
Let's go, Bob. Let's go to this D3 chart again and show me how you'd work, or walk me through how to work it from right to left. Let me refresh that real quick.
Yeah. You can usually click on the filter that you just clicked, but after you do a couple clicks, you forget which one was which. And
Gotcha. So what would you do to work backwards? Would you grab the leagues up at the top here?
Just grab the team on the right, all the way to the right there. So click on a New Hampshire Avalanche. Or
on this one, it is the junior programs. I see. Okay, so let's jump down and see if we can find a good pick. I'm not sure if everybody can see that. I'll expand it up a little bit. I'm looking at the junior list of teams, and
that's the number of players they moved on.
Yeah, so let's grab Kenai. There we go. So now we can see where Kenai gets their players from. Is that correct with the map?
Right. Yeah. That's the well, I guess that's that birthplace field on
right.
like the Patra.
That's phenomenal. That's really, really cool. So now you
one
got
thing to note there, some of the teams, I'm sorry, the teams that have NCDC and USPHL Premier teams, like the top couple there, they get, credit for both of them. So if you click on that, it'll split their, NCDC and USPHL teams in half.
Gotcha. Okay, so that's a cumulative number between the NCDC and the USHL
right.
Premier. Okay, very good. Well, that would attest for the large numbers for some of those programs, but that's still that's still really, really cool. Mike, any questions you've got on this?
Well, you can definitely see if you're searching by a junior program, maybe where some of their recruiting pipelines are coming from. Obviously these different programs have, coaches that are somebody that they either coached one time or were friends with and are coaching in a particular market. And it seems like they might be pulling their players from there. So be interesting to see if year after year after year, their heat map is coming from the same regions.
I just randomly decided to pull up this team called Lone Star Brahmas, and
I've heard of them.
East, West, and North and South. Looks like they got a good coverage of the whole United States there. But interesting how it does not show the Canadian players on there. And there's what, 3 or 4, Mike, now that are on the team?
I don't think we have any anymore.
Oh, that's right. That's right.
This isn't showing the current roster. This is sending the guys who moved on to play at D3 level.
Yeah. Oh, correct. I'm sorry. It wasn't looking at the current roster. You're absolutely right. These are guys that have moved on and are playing. So that would make even more sense, because a lot of the Canadian players that don't make it to a Division I program will go up to play in the U Sport category and go back home somewhere, go back to Canada somewhere. They don't necessarily always go to D3 if they don't make a D1 team. So
what this is really useful for is, I was on the phone actually today with a couple kids, and they were just telling me how they were planning to go play for a junior program out east, because that's where the colleges are, or there's the most amount of colleges out east. And, was hearing from different programs that, Texas, there's not any programs there. Nobody goes to Texas to play hockey. But you can see from that little heat map that a lot of the places that, for this instance, the Brahmas were moving guys to actually were out east. So it kind of, it wrecks that narrative when you actually put fact to it, rather than just, opinions and hearsay and, everything else. So that just kind of shot that one down.
Bob, what kind of feedback are you getting so far?
I mean, mostly positive. Like I said, it's an interesting tool. I'd be interested to hear if it would be something that'd be useful for for other leagues. I didn't do Division I because the team right before that they're in their Division I school isn't usually the team that they committed from.
At least on Elite Prospects, that's the way it does.
Right. The way I'm doing the analysis, it wouldn't work, I don't think, for them.
Right. I fully agree.
So I don't know if it would work for USHL or North American League, or but since it's automated, it's
I fully agree, Bob. What happens, we find a lot of times, is we have to explain to people, when you look at D1, you're taking a snapshot of that day, because D1, it's a 12-month calendar, and it's always changing. It'll change when the kids, if they commit at 16s, as soon as they go to their 18 or their prep or their junior, it's changing. So, don't use Elite Prospects as that. So a couple questions came in. One came in from Kelly asking the question, is this available online? I'll give a partial answer to this, Kelly. We've posted the D3 one on Junior Hockey Advisor. However, Bob, I'm sure there's other ways for them to grab this. Maybe you can explain how they can grab these lists.
Well, I guess the easiest way would be go to that public.tableau.com and search for Stroik.
Tell you what, we'll grab the link, and I'll put the link on the on this video afterwards, so that people can go straight to that and jump it. So,
but it was in the Facebook group, so that's probably the easiest way too for this group to find it.
Got another person that says very, very useful. Thanks for coordinating these charts. Hey, absolutely, Bob. This is interesting for many different ways. First of all, like you said, it's automated now, which takes away that time-consuming. When I do these for D1, I mean, I'm sitting home for a weekend, and it's get up, get a cup of coffee, and you start grabbing players off of EP. You build a spreadsheet, you put them over there, and I've got 3 or 4 screens going, and it's a pain in the rear end. It takes 20, 30 hours. So I got to imagine that now that this is up, you've got all of your ACHA, you've got D3. Is there other uses for this that you see that maybe in the back of your mind you're thinking, well, my next chart will be?
I was kind of thinking of maybe trying to do games played, for going forward, which by program. So if a team sends 20 guys to D3, but between them they got 25 games played by the end of the following season.
Right. That's a great statistic and a great tool for everybody involved. I'd like to see that for guys coming out of juniors and coming out of college. That'd be great stat.
Right.
So excellent. So, Mike, anything
different because it's a little thing different to grab.
Hey Bob, I got a former player of mine that played for your. I don't know if he was ACHA D1 or D2, but do you know a player by the name Andrew Marciniak?
Yeah, he played for me. He played for me for 2 seasons. Great kid.
Yeah, I used to have him.
He played 1 season for us, then down 2 seasons for us. 1 for D1, 2 for us, and then 1 for D1 again. We sent him back up.
Nice. That's awesome. He was a good kid.
So while we got you, Bob, let's talk a little bit about ACHA hockey and a little bit about the University of Delaware. Demystify this for a lot of people because, to be honest with you, we have 1 or 2 experts. One of my best friends coaches University of Illinois, or Illinois State. I'm sorry. So we get information from him, and he's got great information for us. But tell us a little bit. How big is your recruiting net? Do you guys have a traveling recruiting system where you go to showcases, or where do you find your talent?
Well, we just had an event over the weekend. It was free. It was for anybody who wanted to come. We had, I think, 92 kids sign up, and we had to cut it off about 3 weeks early because we ran out of ice time.
Nice.
So when we have tryouts, we'll have 110 kids come in for tryouts. A lot of our kids are East Coast, New York to Virginia is kind of our, sweet spot, I guess you'd say. But we get kids from all over, like Marcy's from, Illinois. Get a couple. Actually, we've been getting quite a few kids from Illinois lately, in Wisconsin now, a couple, Texas, California. So we get kids from all over. Basically, it's kids who want to go for the University of Delaware. Whether it's for chemical engineering, kinesiology, things that we're really known for. So kids who are definitely thinking academics first, and hockey second. So, but we our Division I team, I think we have 6 or 7 NCAA D3 transfers. Guys who just decided they wanted to focus on school and still wanted to play, and
right.
And then we got so probably half transfers, half junior, and then we also have kids who come straight from U18 Tier 2 hockey that are successful. And
what you can see on
just
some
like
of
anything,
your, sorry, Bob, I was going to say what you can see on some of your graphs is you can actually see that ACHA does give you an avenue. Now the avenue is still 10-20% overall, and it's hard to say because there's so many ACHA teams, but there is an avenue for players to come out of high school playing U18 and move on to ACHA. Yeah. It's not like Division III or Division I where you rarely see that. Right. You see that here.
Right. Yeah, and it varies by programs. That's something that this tool could help you for. There are some programs that are, you have to age out almost, to play for. And this will help you kind of filter through them,
Fantastic.
Hockey's something that's a deciding factor when you're picking schools.
So questions coming in from Samuel. He says, would it be a good idea to, out of high school, to try out for ACHA Division II team or try to play juniors? Bob, take a crack at that.
So my opinion is if that's the level you're at, juniors is it's an investment in time and money that might not be necessary.
Great answer. Great answer. Mike, elaborate.
Yeah, I think that's a good point, especially if you're talking about Division Two. Depending on where you're at in the country, but let's say you're in one of the big markets. You're out east, you're in Minnesota, you're in Michigan, you're in Illinois, even Texas, California, and you're playing a high level of AA or AAA. You're probably not going to have an issue making a Division Two team because you're already at that ability. So, to Bob's point, going the path of juniors and things like that, I guess if you're going to go the junior route, your hope is to make a higher level than that, which is why you're going down that path. But you should have the ability to be able to play an ACHA Division Two. If you're in a market that, maybe you're in, I don't know, Nebraska or Alabama or, somewhere else where like the top level that you're playing at isn't quite as high, then you need more development, and you might not be able to just go to a Division two school and still make it. So then maybe starting on a Division three team, if, because a lot of these programs have multiple options, just like Bob does at Delaware. These teams will have maybe a D3, a D2, and sometimes a D1, or a D1 and a D3, so you might not be able to make D1 right away, but you can play D3 for a couple years. So it all depends on where you're coming from and what level you're at on whether or not that's necessary.
Bob, where does this AAU model fit into things now? We've got this ACHA model that has just exploded in the amount of size and the amount of teams. Where does AAU fit in? What does it do for you?
Well, I always refer to them as our Division III team because that's what they were. They were the Division III ACHA team. A subset of them felt that the ACHA wasn't representing them well enough, and they went off and started their own thing. Which
I got you.
And it's American.
I got
right?
you. So
I can do it better.
Yeah,
Go ahead.
They weren't feeling enough love from the major group. That's kind of the feeling some people in the USPHL that are playing in the elite division feel. They feel that all the attention is given to the NCDC and to the Premier League, and the elite sometimes feels left out a little bit. And that's the same thing you're talking about here. And they broke off, but then you brought them back with an AAU umbrella.
Right.
Very good.
Basically, their whole conference left, so if they stayed ACHA, they'd have nobody to play. So they were kind of
you had no choice then. Very good. Now, Bob, how long have you been doing this?
I've been doing it since we started the Division II program in 2011.
Wow,
that's when we started.
Wow.
Yeah, so
any aspirations to move up the ladder and take over as head coach or someday at one of the programs?
Absolutely not.
Just happy right where you're at, huh?
Yeah, I don't need that headache.
So, Bob, you're a research scientist by trade. Tell us a little bit about what kind of research you do, and did that correlate over into helping you understand the model to get these graphs and charts built?
I mean, a little bit. I mean, I mess with data, all the time. I work with air quality, environmental data from all over the place, all over the world and this stuff, and trying to see patterns and, and that kind of stuff. So you get a little bit of a knack for those kind of things, and just managing large data sets and, 4,000 people is just, a data set's a data set. Once it gets past a number, when you don't want to hand type it in anymore, then it's, like I said, 100's the same as 1,000 is the same as 1,000,000, if you're automating it.
That's what I say with money all the time to my kids. $100, $1 million. Once it gets past a certain amount, it doesn't matter anymore. Hey, Bob, thank you so much. This is right up our alley. Is there a way people can get a hold of you or a place they can go? I mean, you can always just check in with the junior hockey advisor, and people can put comments there, and you can respond there. Is there a better way for people to go over?
I'm happy to share my email address if that's all right with you.
Do you mind if we'll post that on this broadcast too? So if anybody has questions about
ACHA hockey or Delaware in general, or this process,
absolutely. What I would suggest to people that are watching right now, if you haven't grabbed the one on junior hockey advisor on the discussion group, grab that and play with it, and then you can jump into the ACHA ones from there. They're fun. As a hockey geek and as somebody that loves numbers and loves following the trends of what's going on, I find this fascinating, and I find it extremely helpful just to get a gauge on, an area that I'm not strong in. I can't tell you the breakdown of ACHA players. And to be honest with you, I can snap an answer off of D1. I can kind of give you good trend numbers on D3, but you've perfected the science, which is going to make it easier for everybody like us.
Oh, good. If anybody wants to, if you are so inclined, that on that Tableau link, I believe you can actually download the data set as well. So if anybody wants to play with it and do something else with it, that data is out there. It's already compiled for you. So have at it.
You need to do this for some of my old teams, and then I can go in and I can manipulate the numbers to make it look like I was a goal scorer and add a few stats to make myself look better. So. Bob, thank you so much. Have a great night. I sure appreciate you taking the time to come on tonight and explain the process and explain how this all works. Have a great night.
Appreciate it. Thank you. You too.
Thanks, Bob.
That was pretty cool.
That was really cool. I actually, my comment about, just some of the conversations I've had, but I really see value in that because, again, there's so many narratives out there that, you can, instead of taking my opinion or your opinion or somebody else's opinion, just look at the data. And that's what we talk about all the time when we're doing this show and you jump on the EP, and there's no manipulation of facts when it's there. It's black and white. It either happened or it didn't happen. And, that's a tool that you can get a lot of value out of for a number of different reasons.
And I see the audience is growing a little bit. What we're talking about is the statistical data that Bob Stroik put together, and we've housed this actual report here. It's actually highlighted at the top of Junior Hockey Advisor. It's tagged to be at the top of the list. But on the left, you can grab different universities, and you can look at the different schools and see where they, for example, if I grab Hamilton College, it'll actually give me. Let me reload that to make sure I'm getting. There we go. There's the full list. Let's just grab. I'll go back to Hamilton because I said I was going to do Hamilton. I grab Hamilton College. It gives me a breakdown of where those players are coming from on the national map, and then on the top here, it gives me what leagues they're coming from. So 7 players from the NAL, 5 players from US Prep, 4 from the AJ, 4 from the CCHL, the BC. They got 2 transfer players from the NCAA, 2 players from the NCDC. And this is. Remember, I always talk about the fact that there's different levels of D3 hockey. If you look at some of the lower level teams, and I'm not going to pick any out, I don't want to pick on anybody, they're not going to have the NAL, and they're not going to have so much. They're not going to have NCAA transfers, and they're not going to have BCHL players. They're going to be built with different players, with more premier players and more players from a lower level. So you pick the high end schools. For example, once again, I used Adrian because it's right on the top of the list. Their first category is NCAA players. That's their biggest draw, is getting transfer players in. Then the OJ, then the NAL, and then the smaller ones are NCAA transfers, NCDC. They've got some NJ, some NoJo, some CCHL, and they got a nice little breakdown there. But these bigger blocks, when you start looking at it, that's really cool to get an idea. Not only that, but what I like about this is if I click on the NAL, now it actually breaks down on the right here, and I'm going to try to expand that up so you guys can see it a little better. It'll break down the NAL and tell me what teams are supplying players. If I go back, I can do that with whoops, sorry about that. Went too far back. Let me grab another school. I'll just grab, who do I want to grab? Oh, I'll grab one from your area. We'll grab Lake Forest.
Thank you.
They're just from the Illinois area. So 7 NAL players, 7 NCDC, 6 EHL. Pretty good balance between those leagues. They got a couple 4 NCAA Division IIIs, but you can see, Lake Forest isn't usually running for a national title. I don't want to call them a middle of the pack team, but quality school, quality program, just a different breakdown. But if you look at this and you go, okay, that's interesting. They've got 6 players from the EHL. Boom, I click on the button. I'm over here going, oh, wow. the Connecticut Rough Riders, Team Maryland. That gives me a good idea where the kids are coming from. NCDC, who's feeding them from the NCDC? Well, it looks like it's a pretty even split by 5 or 6 teams. If I look at the Null, they got 7 players there. St. Cloud a couple, but then again, it's an even distribution from 4 or 5 other teams there. I think that's a fascinating quick grab for parents and players to be able to go, this is where players are coming from, with much, much more detail now, and make it a little more fun. I mean, to be honest with you, you can sit here all day long and click on states and click on teams, and so that's cool. I know I'm overkilling this. We got other things we want to chat with real quick. We're not going to be on much longer, but Mike, you ever see anything like this? As far as, I mean, we see these stat sheets come out all the time, where people say, "Oh, here's where all these players are coming from," but this is pretty good. This is pretty cool.
Well, it's super easy to navigate, and the hardest part, you and I are almost like experts in reverse engineering on EP and figuring out the paths of these different players and where they go and things like that. But even that takes a little bit of time, and it's not easy to click from team to team or league to league, when you're doing that. Whereas this, I mean, you're just clicking a tile or the heat map, and it's giving you all the information that you could ever want. So I didn't know what to expect coming into this. I know you had a chance to see it before we jumped on this, but I'm walking away even more impressed with it and trying to figure out how I can use it in the conversations that I have.
Dear boy. It's been up on Junior Hockey Advisor for over a week now.
Yeah.
At any point, you could have looked at it.
That's true, but how much content is on that site?
A lot.
I'm not scouring the site.
I get it. You're busy. So
some of us actually get on the ice, where we don't have a computer in front of us.
Frank says, very informative. Thanks, Frank. We've got Mark coming on and saying, hi from New Hampshire. Good to see you, Mark. And then we've got Junie coming on and saying, are you guys going to be at the Null Showcase this upcoming season? If you're talking about the Blaine Showcase, we are traditionally there. Mike and I have been there the last few years. Yes, we do plan on being there. That's part of our gig. Unless something changes, you got some news you got to tell us about. Did we get fired or something? Let us know, Junie. If that's the case, then maybe no. But yeah, we're normally there. As far as showcases the rest of the year, my showcases until our pre-draft in June. I'm not on the road. I know people have been emailing me and asking me, am I going to be here? Am I going to be at the USHL? Things I've traditionally been at in the past. No, not this year. Can't do it. Too many conflicts on the schedule. So I will not be there. The question I had earlier was about how to prepare and what to do for a USHL combine coming up. So in general, let's just talk about combines and what you can do to prepare for combines prior to. Look, not always do you get an idea who's going to be there, but it's not a bad idea if you're going to a USHL combine. There's only a few teams. There's only 14 teams, 12? What
16, I think.
Yeah, whatever the number is. We'll figure it out one of these days how many teams they got. But you could easily grab their profile pages and just write down the coaches, maybe write down a little bit about them, assistant coach, maybe get an idea what his age is, maybe get a little idea where he's from or what schools he's coached at or where he went to school at. Anything that if you run into him, because you will run into a lot of coaches at these kind of combines, at the snack bar, standing in the stands, in the lobby, at a presentation that they're doing, because a lot of times these coaches will do presentations. Anytime you can, say, hey, look, I saw that you went to the University of X. My son's interested, and that's coincidence that you're there. What do you think about the school? What do you like about it? Anything that can ice break, it's always good for both you and your player. The other thing too is these are late spring, summer events, and you tend to want to be casual because kids have been in suits and ties all year when they go to their games. But just keep the player looking decent going to and from the rink. I remember when I was attending Muskegon about 3 or 4 seasons ago, which is a USHL team, and this is their main camp. And one of the things that was very interesting was the general manager pulled everybody together in the stands. He stood at the bottom and he was talking up to everybody with this microphone. And he basically said, look, if we see you on your cell phone too much, you got other things to worry about. If you see you hanging out with your girlfriend instead of with meeting players or meeting coaches or doing something productive with your time when you're hanging around the rink, you got other things on your mind. If you come in looking like a slob, we're going to think you play like a slob. And if you don't think we know who you are off the ice, we do know who you are off the ice. And if we don't, we'll figure it out real quick who you are off the ice, and we'll know. So don't take any chances when you go to these things. Look decent. So you can still wear shorts, but wear a nice, collared shirt with your shorts. Nice the kind of shirt that Mike's got on right now is fine. Don't slap the hat on backwards. If you wear the hat, wear it forwards, and when you get in the locker room, hang it up, leave it up on the. Don't do anything that. Remember, it's not your peer group you're trying to impress. You're trying to impress adult men between the ages of 28 and 68. You don't know the age of the guy that's scouting, recruiting, coaching, but they all look at the world differently than you do. They don't look at it like hat on backwards or hat on sideways looks cool. They don't like droopy drawers. They want the pants. They like to see belts. And those are little things that you can do just to make yourself look good. They don't want to see you out there with a pair of neon blades on your skates with pink laces and one of those big freaking laces hanging out from tying your pants, hanging out down your crotch almost to the ice. None of that stuff impresses people at this level. They're looking for, don't get me wrong, you wear a bright yellow pair of gloves, you might get noticed a little bit, but it'll be for, what the hell's that guy got bright yellow gloves on for? That's what you're going to get noticed for, not for your talent. So just go out there and be yourself and play. The biggest thing is, I would highly suggest that stay in the hotels they tell you to stay in, because there's a good chance there's going to be coaches there too. And you never know when you're down at breakfast, when you start up a conversation. I've had many a conversation with parents where I've learned something about some players that I didn't know before. And I don't tip my hand to them, but I'm just gathering information. And guess what they're doing off of me? They're gathering information off of me too. So it's a two-way street when you meet scouts, recruiters, coaches, assistant coaches, GMs, when you go to these events. That combine gets better and better every year. That combine, it used to be a little bit vanity. You got invited and it really didn't mean much. Now there's an effort put in where there's a lot more effort into scouting that event, where they put some true effort into seeing if there's some USHL talent there. But keep in mind, even if there isn't USHL talent there's going to be other people watching besides the USHL people. So that could be NAL, NCDC, prep schools, USPHL teams, whatever there is, NAL, NA3 teams. They could be there watching too, just ready to find out where everybody fits in, and then be able to make some contact with some players that don't make it to the USHL. Believe me, there's not many players coming out of the combines that are going to get recruited, scouted, or drafted. It's a very small number. Does it happen? Yes, it does, but it's a super small number of players that make it through that route. Mike, anything on that?
Well, I would just add, from the player perspective, there's also a way that you're going to want to try to showcase yourself in that type of environment, because it's not easy when you're not playing with your team and you don't know who your center or your right wing is, or the 2D, and everyone's coming from playing in different systems, and you're wearing a different helmet than the next guy, and no one's ever on the same page. And one shift you're a center, the next shift you're a right wing. You're just all over the place. So sometimes kids really struggle trying to figure out, well, how do I actually get to play my game? And that's important for them to learn how to do. And that's, not trying to do too much and be a puck hog. And, if I'm a defenseman, I'm not trying to go coast to coast and trying to beat everybody and, passing up my wingers on the way up the ice, because that's going to be looked at as a negative, whereas kids' perception is, well, that's a positive. Or, I just came in and did this backhanded toe-y past this guy and, did whatever. Like, you have to play the right way to show the scouts what you can do. but also not play like such an individual, because that's what kids think. Well, I got to showcase me. And what ends up happening is it actually turns into a negative. You still want to show that you can see the ice and make the right play at the right time and be in the right place at the right time, even though it's a little bit more chaotic because both teams aren't in their systems and they're not playing on the same page because they're all different kids,
Yep.
Playing and whatnot. So there is a technique that kids get more used to by doing these events on how they can really showcase themselves in the right way. And that just takes time and experience. You could sit your player down and say, don't do this, don't do that, all these different things. And they're going to see someone they're playing with that just made a crazy play and whatever else. And they think, oh, that kid just got noticed. They don't realize that it might have been a negative notice from a scouting staff or a coach. But to a kid or a peer, they think, oh my God, that's so cool. He just did that. So then they try doing it and then it doesn't work and it just compounds the issue or whatnot. So to your point of you're not there to impress your peers, that goes on the ice as well with what you're trying to do out there.
Yeah, I agree. I think that a couple of things I'd say. I'll throw my parent hat on for a second here. When my son was 14 or something was when he did the USHL showcase, and they had the event in Chicago at the time. What was interesting about it was he was naive. He bought into the fact that it was a USHL event. He had a USHL T-shirt on, and he was there. He had arrived, and it wasn't like there was an ego involved. He just assumed that everybody there was going to be a draft pick, and it was just a matter of sorting out, who's going to get drafted or who's going to get a tender. And then, as the weekend went on, he realized that that wasn't the case at all, and that probably out of that event there was only 10 of them that after another couple seasons ended up being drafted out of that group, including him. But what was interesting about it is if you looked at that as his first event and then you looked at his last showcase before he entrenched himself into the junior ranks and was a committed player and all those things, totally different player. He would walk in the locker room, he'd introduce him to everybody, he would actually do homework on figuring out who's good here. Okay, he's good. Okay, on the bench, we're going to sit together as a group because most of the coaches just go next three out. Some will actually assign lines depending on how organized the event is. Some will have lineup sheets, but he was also he worked his way through to figure out, okay, I've got to be on the ice with talent. I've got to be on the ice with a good set of defensemen. And you'd see him at times later, where he'd get the wrong group of four guys out there, and he'd shift, he'd switch, he'd change right away. Be out there 15 seconds, look around, go, I'm not going to look good out here because there's nobody to support out here to look good too. So he'd change just to get himself in that lineup with the better players on the bench. Those are the little tricks that work. And, one of the things you said that, the don'ts to do, but I think you can do things positive to help yourself here besides just play well, but you can do a lot of negative to pull your image down. Roll your eyes, slap your stick, shrug your shoulders, look at another player and throw your hands up and go, what did you do that for after a goal? Do all those things. Those things right there will absolutely, take you down the list real quick. The other thing too is there's a difference between aggression and aggressive. Aggression is when you're going out there trying to start a fight. In my opinion, I'm just using this term that I use. You don't have to be you can be a very aggressive player, and showcases are the time to show yourself being aggressive. And even if you're not an aggressive player, show that you can still throw the body. You don't have to get in fights. Fights are very minimal at showcases. They're very minimal at main camps. Usually it's players that are a tough guy and a tough guy decide that they want to see who's going to be the tough guy. That might happen, and that's the anomaly these days. This is not part of the game like it used to be. But boy, oh boy, you want to see coaches get the pen out and start writing. Go out there and bang 3 or 4 people every single shift and watch coaches start taking note of that. If you've got speed, if you can skate and you can get in the way of people, if you can, muck it up a little bit, that's where people are going to get impressed. Even if you're a scorer, show that you're not afraid to hit somebody. Show that you're not afraid to get hit. that'll go a long way.
Yeah, I was just going to say that the things to do that always get noticed is if you're back checking as hard as you can. If you like, everybody wants to be the F3, so then they got an opportunity to, pick off a pass and get a shot on net. But to be the F1 that goes in and takes away all the time and space from the D and finishes this check, like if you're constantly that guy, you're going to get noticed. And
For
obviously,
those of you that don't know what Mike's talking about, F1's the first guy in the zone that's a forward. Okay, that's coach talk. Okay, F3 is like in football, is your safety or your defensive back. He gets to keep the play in front of him, and he gets to, depending on who his coach is, he gets to pick and choose when he's aggressive. He can, even if he's supposed to be aggressive, because he's F3, sometimes he can slow his feet down a little bit so he doesn't have to be as aggressive. But it's just a terminology that we use if you're not familiar with that. F1, F2, and F3 are just forwards. D1, D2 are the D. And, some teams, this is interesting, some teams now just go F1 through F5. They don't even worry about calling them defenseman or forward. They might line up and start someplace, but they're very interactive and they don't really care as much.
Yep.
I just educated our group. See how that works?
Maybe not. Maybe our group is more advanced than you think they are.
Including Junie and Frank?
Not Frank, but I bet Junie.
Frank, we're just kidding. You're always loyal. It's good to see you guys there. Troy threw out a comment. Not a me game, it's a we game. Absolutely, but you got to be selfish at tryouts. You got to look like, you got to make sure. You got to make sure that you do what's best for you and still show that you can be a team player. And that's the rub. How do you show you're a team player but make sure that you're showcasing all your skills? So anyway, hey, look at this. I just want to show you. Hey, thanks. This should say thanks, Jeff. Never knew that. Okay.
It also says just Facebook user, so you could have just typed that to yourself.
I could have typed that to myself, but I could probably, if you would ever go on to our discussion group, you would see exactly who that was, because it'll show up on one of the 3 Facebook pages, but it shows up on this system because we're using a provider to distribute this. It only shows up as Facebook user. However, audience, if you're paying attention, on Restream, when this broadcast first starts, there should be a little tab that tells you how to actually set it up so you can get your name to show up if you're a Facebook user. So when you first turn the broadcast on, in the comments area, there should be a little bit of a tab there where you can jump in and fix it so your name shows up too. And if you don't, that's fine too. We're okay with that. Mike, anything else?
No, first day of the NHL playoffs, so this is usually the best time of the year. I have kind of been watching some of the first couple of games, and I got to say I'm a little disappointed. They usually are running around, finishing all their checks. It's highly intense, and I'm not really seeing it. So hopefully the games tonight and tomorrow, are what I hope they'll be.
Are you predicting anything? Do you have a team you like?
You know what? I'm in a playoff pool with the guys I coach with. And the way that it's set up, I haven't seen this before, but it's like Super Bowl squares, and the teams are kind of lined up across. And for whatever reason, I got the Canes for both of my options coming out of the East. And then I got like the Kraken and the Kings or somebody else. So basically, I'm forced into being a Canes fan now based on where my squares are. So I'm going to pick the Canes, even though I personally don't think that they're going to be the team that comes out. And out of the West, geez, I have to go Edmonton. I'm going to go Edmonton, and then I'll stick with the Canes for the Stanley Cup Finals.
We got people throwing up their teams left and right here. Won't go through them all, but because we picked on Junie a little bit, Junie's going go Devils, so we'll throw that out there. And by the way, Junie, we do know the number of teams in each league. We're just, sometimes we make fun of the different leagues. So Kelly's got something interesting here. Let's throw this on, and then we're going to start wrapping up here. Kelly says, did one combine this season and ended up on a dream combine team, but really felt for some of the teams that were trounced on by some of the better teams. Any advice for players who end up in the situation and how to manage the mental game through the weekend? Okay, so this is the reality. There are combines that's done on purpose. There are combines you'll go to where the teams are stacked and they're maybe all the good forwards are on this team and all the good D are over here. Maybe all the good D are here and the good forwards are here. You'll just see some coaches or some programs like it that way. It also could be by age. You'll see sometimes they put a lot of veteran players over here. You'd like to see an equal distribution. You'd think that that'd be the way it is, but the reality is, there might be 8 teams in this, and they might put all the players that they know they really want to look at on one team. They might want to put a bunch of veterans that they're not interested in but are quality players over here. They might put it could be anything. It could be all, they could put all 07s on this team, also 06s over there. You don't know until you get there a lot of times. But if you do get on a bad team, the thing you got to do is absolutely don't let it disrupt what you do well. Okay? If you're great at making the first pass out, but the kid can't catch it, keep making that first pass out if you're a defenseman. If you're great on forechecking, but there's nobody there to support your forecheck, you keep doing what you do well. You can adjust a little bit to the bad play, but hey, let's face it, if you're 2 steps above everybody else on the ice on your team, what you have to do is just play through it. Now, if the showcase at times, they might change teams up. But really what you're doing in a lot of cases, if there's an all-star game, is you're trying to get it to that final cut. Okay, so you just want to look good. You want to keep showing your speed. You want to keep yourself into it. You want to stay positive. And honest, I can tell you one thing that's the God-honest truth. Score doesn't matter in these things. The final score, 4-3, there isn't a coach in the world that when the regular season comes around, I know one, and we work for them, that would remember the actual scores of the games. But the majority of the time, they're looking at what you can do within the structure, okay? And look, this happens all the way at every level of hockey. You can get up to college, and you could be at a college tryout where it's they're going from 40 players to 30, and they split the group up, and all the veteran players from last year in college are on one team, and everybody else is on the other team. Well, you're going to go up against some talent. Can you imagine being at the University of Michigan, and they're going to keep 30, and they got 40 guys still in camp, and they put the 10 that aren't in the lineup for Michigan on one team along with 10 guys that have never played at Michigan before, and then they put all their stars on the other side along with their recruits that are coming in that are superstar recruits. That's intimidating, but it happens. People are going to come out of that losing side. You just got to put yourself in a spot that helps you. I know there's no good answer to that. Mike, you got anything to elaborate on that?
I just I think that I didn't realize that there's a strategy to having an unbalanced team like that, because that's not really something I ever modeled any of the camps I've ran or have been a part of, because I don't feel like you see what you need to see in that. But that, I guess, is my opinion. To me, it would seem that whoever organized it didn't do their homework to try to balance out the teams, and they just took names and said, we'll put these guys here. And then next thing you know, you've loaded up a team and you didn't realize it, which if that ever did happen and it was something we were running, we'd probably step in and say, okay, we got to move this around a little bit. Or there was like a really weak goaltender that kind of offset, what, that team looked like or whatnot, to try to help it out so everybody looks good. But you want competition. And if one team's blowing out the other team, neither of those teams look like they're being really pushed or, competitive enough to see what you need to see. So I'm not familiar with seeing that. I personally haven't seen it where it was uneven like that, but I would have hoped that they would have stepped in and tweaked it to where it wasn't like that.
Two reasons it happens a lot is, don't forget, juniors, college, U18. A lot of times these types of things like the showcases or the pre-draft camps, whatever you're going to call them. Now the professional showcases are different. When you talk about the Chowder Cup and things like that, let's leave those aside. because those you bring in your own team. You're building a team to take to
Yeah.
those. But if I'm doing a USHL event and the guy that's putting this together is the new assistant coach who's also the assistant GM that is 1 year out of college playing, and this is his first gig, a lot of times even at the USHL level, you'll run across this where there hasn't been any thought because he still doesn't know the difference between the Gojo and the BCHL. He doesn't know that a leading scorer out of the he probably knows the BCHL, but he doesn't know all the leagues. He doesn't know all the U18s. Doesn't know all the preps, and so he's getting all this stuff coming in and just does a poor job of managing it. The other times is if there's 8 teams, they might load up 4 teams because they know those are the 4 teams they really want to watch kids on, and the other 4 teams are just fodder. And that, honestly, I've seen it more often than I want to, but I've seen it numerous times. I've had both of my kids go through it at numerous times where there's just showcases that are slanted, they're tilted, and they've been on the good side of it and they've been on the not so good side of it. So it happens on both sides. So anyway, very good. Kelly said it was a very large combine. Yeah, so that's the other thing too is you might think that everything looks balanced on paper, and then when the combine shows up, maybe 2 of the kids that were going to be the stronger kids on your team didn't show up. Maybe there was an injury, something happened, and on paper it all looked good, and maybe it didn't look so good once things actually started running. So I'm sorry it was a bad experience. I hope you made the best of it, Kelly. I hope your son made the best of it and still performed at his best. Junie's got another question, and that is the NAL better than the QMJHL? It's apples and oranges. It's very difficult to compare something because, first of all, age. You're talking about a league that's extremely young with the Q, and you're talking about a older league that's designed for a different purpose. The Q still has players that are looking to go straight professional. They want to play in the Q, then they want to go straight from the Q and jump into pro hockey. NAL players are not in that situation where they're looking to play NAL and go to on. So you've got 2 different designs of players and 2 different styles. Putting them head to head, I would give the nod, believe it or not, to the NAL because of size and age. There's still very good skilled Division I players in the NAL, but the Q being the weakest of the 3 of the majors, I don't know. That's my opinion. Mike, what's your thoughts on that?
I would probably say the Q is better because they're going to have higher level talent,
more skilled on the top end. I
Yeah.
fully agree.
So if you're going to talk about NHL prospect or even, they can't go to college. But if they could, they would probably, a lot of them or mostly would be D1 players, probably at some of the biggest schools. So for that, believe me, as much as I hate the Q, I got to at least give them the credit for the talent level that they have within their league. But again, I would like to see a NAL team play against them. There'd be less skill on the NAL team, but that doesn't mean they couldn't win the game because, to your point, they're older, they're heavier. There's some advantages that they might have. The speed and the skill of the Q, though, might offset that. So it'd be a good matchup. It's kind of like when you get a team like North Dakota or Denver or Minnesota or Michigan that is young and super skilled and super talented, and you play them against a Quinnipiac or a team that's maybe less skilled or definitely less skilled, but older and more structured.
So a few years ago, it happens every single year. You get a situation where the Team USA, the National Development Program, 17s and 18s, they'll do a tour, and they'll play some NAL teams in different states. I know they played actually at our showcase this last year. Was it this year they played?
I think so. Yeah.
Yeah. And I get confused because it's year after year. I know my son had a chance when he was a NAL player to play against them, and they had good success. And you'd say, well, that's the best players maybe in the world on that national development team, best team, across the board as far as the number of NHL draft picks, There's the amount of guys that can step right from that team, literally step from that team, maybe play a year of college. But, we had the Hughes kid went straight from that team right to the NHL a couple of years ago, plays for New Jersey. And that's not uncommon. There's that much talent there. But you play them in the early in the season with an all team, just bigger, stronger kids. And you'll see scores that you're like, well, the all team won 3-2. Yeah, because there's still enough skill. There's still Division I players on those null teams. But, when you add 30 pounds to a kid, you add a couple more years of just experience and size, it's still intimidating. I don't care how skilled you are. If you go in the corner and you weigh 140, 150, and the kid you're going in the corner is bouncing you around because he's 195, you still get intimidated. Skill doesn't mean you don't get intimidated. Skill doesn't mean you don't have to back down if there's a bigger kid that's coming at you full speed. So that's why you see it. I know we answer this question a lot. We'll jump on this one. NCDC versus null. Listen, it's not even close to be honest with you. NCDC has good teams. Top 2-3 teams in the league are always good. I've used this example before. You can take the Hitmen in any given year, maybe not last year. Although I did see one of those crazy online junior polls that had the Hitmen rated this year above a bunch of the other teams in the league, and the Hitmen weren't that good this year. And then it says in the bottom, this doesn't go off of previous reputations. That was like their disclaimer, but everything in there was off of. Anyway, I digress.
Well, the Hitmen were good. They were still the number one team in their division. They just didn't do well in the playoffs.
Yeah, but it wasn't the Hitmen we've seen in the past, and we talked about that all year long, that they just weren't loaded with the same kind of talent that they've been loaded with in the past. But I've often said for the last few years, the Hitmen can play in any league in North America and be successful. They would be fine. The difference between the two leagues is you do not see fresh D1 commits coming out of the NCDC. How do you know that? And this is verifiable. This is not an opinion. Just go to USC, or not USCHO, go to College Hockey Inc., pull up the fresh commitment list, and look at how many fresh commits for this last season. During this season, how many new D1 players do they add? And then look at the null. And it's 10-1. Not 10-1. It might be 20 or 30-1, because the null has 30 teams, and they get a ton of commitments. The NCDC adds 8 to 12 a year. That's what they average every year, somewhere between 8 and 12. Okay, so it's not close. It's two different leagues for two different things. The NCDC wants to call themselves a Tier 2 league, yet they really supply the vast majority of their players are going to play Division III hockey. There's a lot of players that come out of the null that play D3 too. I'm not saying that there isn't, but when it's talking about how do you compete and how do you measure, well, you measure D1 commits. You measure how many guys are going to play Division I college hockey. The null you can take the East Coast division of the null alone, and that will outperform. There might be one or two teams that outperform the whole league, the whole NCDC league for fresh commits this year. Mike, anything to add to that?
I would just say, when you look at the top 2 or 3 teams, you could put them into the null and they would compete with the null teams. And then the rest of the NCDC, if you put with the top of the NA3, those teams would all be very comparable. So, again, when you get to the bottom of the NA3, well, that's not comparable to the NCDC. But when you take that top 10, 15 NA3 teams, they probably would beat some of those middle of the pack to lower NCDC teams. So that's kind of the level. But again, you have the outliers of the top NCDC teams. Those teams could play in the null and do fine, maybe even make the playoffs.
Yeah, we're not going to get into pulling up the statistics for you tonight, just because that wasn't on the agenda, because I would have loaded up a lot of stuff for us. We've got lots of videos on that and lots of discussions about the two different leagues. Even though on paper it looks like, they should be comparable. No. There are good hockey players going to some great colleges playing in the NCDC. They committed at 16s or 18s, or they committed to their prep school before they got there. And that's fine. There's nothing wrong with that. Hell, they can play in the null. We'd love to see them on our team in the null. some of those players because they're going to BC, they're going to BU. There's not that many of them, and the teams that get them are not adding 2 or 3 or 4 or 5 new commits to schools as the year goes on. It's just not a league where it's recruited to find fresh talent. They might go and watch a game to see some of the players they've already got committed. The BU coach might show up and watch his BU guy, but he's not really there to and I can't speak for him. I'm just saying most cases he's not there to do anything else. Anything else, Mike?
No, I was just saying when it comes to that comparison, it's so hard to compare leagues because there's like layers of the ability of the teams within each of those leagues. So when you look at the whole league, that's where, again, with how many teams are in, say, the NA3 compared to the NCDC, it gets a little out of control if you're going to compare the whole league of the NA3, because there are programs that are really struggling for players and the caliber of player that they get and where they move them on to. But again, if you take the top half of that league and you put it against the bottom half of the NCDC, you got the same caliber of player. You move the players to the same places, and it's a little bit easier to compare. But I always hate comparing leagues because it always depends on, well, which program in that league do you want to compare? Because it's too difficult to compare league to league like that.
Hey, look, you might call us homers because we're both involved in the North American Hockey League. I spent many years involved with the USPHL in the NCDC as an owner, as a GM, as a coach. I know all the ins and out of that league. I know the operators, and statistically, you know where it fits. And you got to be careful now because when you go on to, this is something that I noticed recently. If you go on to College Hockey Inc., and I think I pointed this out once, and you look at the commitments, there's only one league that's put their D3 commitments up there along with their D1 commitments to make their list look longer, and that's the NCDC, because they only have a handful of D1 commits, and it's this long of a list, and then they put their D3 guys on, they get a list that's this long, it looks better. No other junior program out there, no other junior program puts on their Division III commitments onto that list. I'm not sure why they're doing that. I'm not sure why College Hockey Inc. is allowing them to do that, because it skews the numbers. It makes it look different. Most people aren't going to know when they look at some of those college names that they're not Division I schools. They just look like, they're schools that you recognize the name of. You go, that kid's going to Bethel. You think, it must be a D1 program. It's not, Anyway, did you see Jared wants us to come out and hang out in Dallas. Jared, we're busy. We're busy, okay? We're not, in this glam job college coach situation where you can just jet set around the world as a college coach because your season's over and be at this event and be at that event. And, you probably got a suite set up and you probably got a bunch of hot women up there with beer. Okay, that's fine. You have fun. These guys here, what we're doing, Mike and I right now, this is work, okay? 9 to 5, grinding it out. You have fun in Dallas, but we're not coming. That's our good fun.
Though. I'm jealous that he's down there. I wish we were down there hanging out with him.
I do too, but it won't happen this week. Hey, listen. Oh, okay, last thing from our friend there. Yes, we're still friends, okay? Listen, thanks so much, folks. This went a little bit longer than I thought. I really hope you enjoyed our guest tonight. I really enjoyed him. I think that the information we got, go to the top of our junior hockey discussion page. You'll see his graph and his information. We'll also put this in the links of this broadcast when we start posting it, so you can grab his email. You can grab more of his graphs. This stuff, what Bob Stroik did here is game-changing for parents and players to be able to track players and see how the trends are working and where players are going and coming from. So take advantage of that information, folks. It's really cool. The other thing, too, is please subscribe to our Junior Hockey Advisor page, and then put a plug in for Wednesday night, Mike.
Yeah, we'll see you guys on Wednesday, Junior Hockey Live. That's where we'll talk about – it's been a couple weeks since we've had an episode, so we'll have to get into all these different playoff matchups here for I think the USHL and the North American League are heading into playoffs. So we'll have to do our homework and try to come up with our picks to move on. And, as always, I'll probably end up winning again, but I'll let you assume that you're involved in this competition in some way.
You sound like my son. In many ways, you are.
What a brilliant
guy. You are my son.
Yeah, yeah.
And I have to tell you both the same thing is, just shut the hell up. Everybody have a great night. We'll see you Wednesday night.
Take care, everyone.